Nailed it right at 7 o'clock. We are live. It's time to talk boost. I'm going to show you guys a dyno curve, and then I'll probably also show you sometimes guys can't see the thumbnail, so I'm actually going to do what I can here to bring up the thumbnail so that you guys can take a look at that. And I'll show you that. Even though that's not really the motor that I'm talking about, it's just a representative one. And then I'm going to go ahead and do a graph because I've got a specific question for y'all. And away we go. So the question is, and I'll be able to show you guys in the thumbnail, there's a photo of a turbo LS. So in the dyno graph example, it's a stock 5.3. So the only thing it has on it is springs because we would eventually install a camshaft. It's a bone stock 5.3 from the wrecking yard. We took it apart, put ring gap in it, put valve springs in it because then we would do some cam upgrades. Before we did that, we ran it with the stock camshaft, the stock intake, and all that stuff, and ran it with like a GT45 turbo, let's say. And I'm going to show you the power curves on it. And so this thing went from, I can talk a little bit about, excuse me. So we're looking at the motor made like 350, low 350s, 351, 352, and then made 550-ish, I think. 545. Yeah, so 546 horsepower. And 589 foot-pounds of torque. And the peak power occurred at a peak boost of 7.8 pounds. So we got good gains. So my question is, and I'm going to show you what these graphs look like so you guys can take a look. Let's go ahead and we'll show people that. We can show them again when more people come in. But see, this is our, hopefully you guys can see the graph there. You guys can see that stuff. So what we have here is this is the torque curve. This is the horsepower curve of the NA motor. This is the torque curve of the horsepower curve of the boosted motor. And you can see railroad tracks, everything looks the same. We have a fairly consistent boost curve. The boost varied by, I don't know, less than a half a pound, 3 or 4 tenths or something like that, I think, when we did this. So it's fairly consistent. And that's not even really, here. It's not even really totally the point. But the question is this. So we have a situation or a combination. We have a stock 5.3, got a stock cam in it, makes 350-ish horsepower, makes 550-ish horsepower at 7.8 pounds. It made as much as 8 pounds later on, but at the power peak it was 7.8 pounds. So my question is this: if we have a combination that's working right, and by that I mean we have enough air fuel, we have the air fuels right, the timing is right. I think that this was run on E85, which explains a little bit of the formula change in power curve. So we had enough air fuel, we had enough timing, we had E85, we had octane, we had intercooling, we had a turbo that was sized to easily run this power level. We had a GT45 on it, and we had good results. You had boost, good things happen, obviously. So my question is this: we have a turbo that will support this power level and this boost level. What happens if we put a bigger, better turbo on this? So what happens if we put, we could select an S475, but like a real, what about a real turbo? What about a real Garrett turbo? What about a forced induction one or forced performance one? What about something that's serious and modern, not a 20-year-old, probably at least, turbo design? What happens if we pick a bigger one? What happens if we had a GT55 or GT65 or the equivalent of that, or a real GT45 from Garrett? What happens if we just had a much better wheel design? I know everyone's going to say, yeah, but what about a billet wheel? Forget about the billet wheel. What if we had a better design? If that happened to be billet too, that would be great, because usually when they do the machining and want to make a new wheel, that's kind of what they do rather than do new castings until they have the wheel right. So the question is, because the question is always, if we put a bigger turbo on it, the bigger turbo will support more horsepower per pound of boost. Well, yes and no, it can. If it can supply the airflow that's needed to run up where the turbo can now support power where the smaller turbo can't. So if you have one turbo that's a 700 horsepower turbo and one's a 1,000 horsepower turbo, and you're asking the 700 horsepower turbo to make 1,000 horsepower, it's not going to do it. And the bigger turbo definitely is. But if you're asking them both to make 550 horsepower, what happens? And this is the question that I get asked a lot, and this is the question I try to answer a lot, because, and the question I think is a multi-tiered question at the very least, because on the grand scale, I don't think you're going to see very much. So, but let's ask people what they think first before I go into my dissertation here, before I stand up on my soapbox. Will a bigger, better turbo offer more horsepower per PSI when the smaller turbo will also support the horsepower level? I'm going to put the level. Bigger, better turbo offer more horsepower when the smaller turbo will also support the horsepower level. Pretty simple. You guys kind of get the idea. If we look specifically at this example, our 5.3, making good power, doing what it's supposed to, not a fantastic turbo. The GT45 works. I mean, it makes, like I said, it's a 750 horsepower turbo or so. It's in a obviously fairly decent spot, making 550 horsepower at the flywheel on this 5.3, and because that makes a difference too. What the motor that you're testing it on is going to dictate the NA power of the motor that you're testing it on, and also to some extent the displacement. It's going to affect how much boost is going to be required to make that power level, and then also the attending back pressure that's going to happen. So if we get to the limit of the hot side before we get to the limit of the cold side, you can run into problems. We've seen this with bigger motors. Running this GT45 on a big block, for instance, pretty responsive, but also it runs out of hot side flow. And runs out of cold side flow too, but hot side flow first on these things. And maybe we could put a bigger hot side on it to cure that. But what you really need to do is just run an S475 or something, or a 7875 from Byron over BS Racing on your big block, and not deal with the little turbo. So the question is, will it support that? Will on our 5.3 with a turbo that will support the power level that we're at, works fairly well. It was very responsive, has a nice smooth boost curve, a nice smooth power curve. If we put a bigger, better turbo on there and run that same boost level, will we make more power? That's the question. Let me know what you guys think. Have you ever tested a variable geometry turbo? I have on the chassis dyno, but it was a factory one. It was a VNT turbo on a Dodge, on a Chrysler one. What did the like button ever do? Come on, step up with the likes, yo. So that's what I want to know. For my personal opinion, is I don't think you at this kind of boost and power level where this turbo is already fairly efficient. I don't think getting a double wazoo turbo, like stepping up to a CEA billet wheel, double ball bearings, double throw down wishbone, like a hush puppy shoe and crumb cake. All of that I don't think is going to get you very much. If it gets you, I honestly would be surprised if we saw any kind of difference at all. If the turbo was bigger and we saw less response, that wouldn't surprise me at all. But if we actually saw more power at the same boost level, I have to say I kind of would be surprised. Now, I don't have back pressure readings on this. I don't think. Let me check and make sure. I don't think I do have back pressure readings. No, I don't on this one. Let's see, boost. Nope, those are inches. $16. It wouldn't be over 2-to-1. That would be it. Let me see if we did something else here. $64. Let's see if we got something here. Nope, no back pressure readings on this one. I don't think they would be very high. I'm sure that they would be less than 2-to-1 or 2-to-1 ish, somewhere in there. And they wouldn't be that until the top of the RPM range, I'm thinking. I'd have to go back and find another 5.3 that we ran. Although this is a stock one. I'd like to find another 5.3 that we ran this thing. Excuse me. To get some back pressure readings, but we're not anywhere near the limit of the hot side of this thing. So that's my question: what do you guys think? I would be surprised if we saw any power at all. Like I said, I see how we could have a change in response, and then the other question becomes: let's say we found a really good turbo with a much better wheel design, and it's spinnier because it has the ball bearings and all that stuff in it. It's more responsive, whatever. Let's say that we had that and it had a better wheel design, is more efficient and in whatever spot of the map that we happen to be on, because I could draw the spot on the map, but we don't have a map to place that spot on because we don't know what the map is on this GT45 turbo. There's nobody that I know has ever done a compressor map on any of these, so we wouldn't know where that places us in terms of the island of efficiency. We know where it would be on the map. We know at the intersection of the horsepower and the airflow horsepower and the boost level are. That's pretty easy to do. That's just two intersecting lines, and that's pretty easy spot to put, at least for and you can do that for every RPM level or something to find out where that's happening. But that's not good information because we don't have a compressor map. But if if we could kind of see where we are. And then you could, on another turbo that had a different map, go, okay, look, this same intersection point is at a different position in the different number on the island of efficiency. Maybe it has 69%. Maybe the other one's got 58% or 61 or whatever the numbers are. If one's higher than the other, maybe you could see something. So let's say, theoretically, we have a really good turbo. Somebody designed a great turbo that's so much better than this one. I don't think that would be hard. I don't think that that's out of the realm of possibility. That would even be more efficient where we are with our 5.3 at 550 horsepower. The next question would be, what if we got more power? What if we got another 10 horsepower? Or 15? At exactly the same boost? Would it be worth it to upgrade to that? It's going to be more expensive because if it's a real Garrett turbo compared to this couple $100 GT45, the real turbo is going to be big money. It might be 10 times as much as the other one. It's certainly going to be 5 times as much, easily. So then the question becomes, even if it was better, we don't know that it is yet, but if it was, is it worth the extra money? For a guy going racing, wanting all of it, he's already going to get a bigger turbo anyway. And so if we had 10 or 15 horsepower, and that was the difference between a good one and a gooder one, you could also just turn the boost up a little bit. And like I said, I think in most instances where a guy was starting to think, hey, most turbo guys are not thinking, what I want to do is I want to be more efficient. What they're thinking is, hey, I want to run more boost and I want to make more power. And with a turbo, that's what they'll do. And so I don't know that the question that I'm asking is other than a very selected group of racers that are going all in on their stuff and can afford the best stuff. That's a very small number of people relative to the guys that buy GT45s. There's thousands of those. There's 10 of the other guys, or 20 or 50 or whatever the number is, but it's thousands versus not very many. So the thing is, again, are we asking the right question? If there is something that's more efficient, which we think that there is, does that translate to power? And then if it does, how much does that power cost? And then would we do it? And would we do it and not just turn the boost up or just put a bigger turbo on and then be able to support more power? Because there's other answers, not just to that question, but other answers to other questions that we probably would be asking that are not the same as the one that I'm asking right now. But let's see how our poll is doing. 59% are saying no. They think that we're doing pretty good already. So for you guys who have not seen it, I'll go ahead and bring our graph up again. So this is our graph. NA 5.3, turbo 5.3, 7.8 pounds. Nice curves. Little GT45 turbo. Would a better turbo at the same boost level do anything better than this? That's our question. And then, by the way, we can show you. Look, this is what the thumbnail looks like. So this is a turbo 5.3. That's actually not a GT45 on there. Right now, the photo that's up is I think it's a CX Racing turbo, if I remember right. It is. And so if we have our typical 5.3 and we make this kind of power curve and this kind of gain at 7.8 pounds, can we do better than that with a bigger, better turbo? And that's the poll right now at the same boost. And that's kind of the thing. We know more boost, and we know a bigger turbo that can not only supply more boost, can support more power, could make more power. That's a fairly easy question to answer. 400,000 on my 03 Express fan. Just got a new transfer. Is it a 4L80 or a 4L60E? Fast TV, didn't miss anything. It's just Richard rambling on about nonsense. With a larger turbo, wouldn't boost come in later? Yeah, we talked about that. It probably would. Have you ever tested a variable geometry turbo? I tested a VNT turbo, and that has the variable vanes in it. In fact, it didn't even have a wastegate on it. Just got home at a decent time for a change. Silicon Valley traffic is no joke. Oh, I bet. Yeah, any sort of Bay Area traffic is not good. Seems like the variable would be like VTEC for boost. No, that's not what it would do. Normally what they're designed to do is come on sooner. Answer to the poll, no, the peak power will be the same. However, the area under the curve might be greater, making it a better driver. So you're thinking of going the other way with a better turbo. And that's interesting. And I'm hoping that this is what you meant. That if we get a better turbo that makes the same power, we can get a better, smaller turbo that's more responsive, but still does what this one does. That would be interesting. That's the other side of the coin to this thing that I wasn't thinking about when I wrote this up. Compound turbos, yeah, that's possible. I don't know if a Johnson 2110R short travel lifter I don't know what the orifice size is on that to know if you would have a larger port. Richard, did you ever do any testing on the Junkyard 496? You mean the 8.1? I haven't put a camera heads on the 8.1 yet. Seattle traffic? Yeah, there's traffic everywhere. Put a small turbo like a GT37-ish on an L96, would you gain low-end power? The turbo would be more responsive, but honestly, I think that turbo is way too small for that application. Who makes the best turbos? I don't know. You gotta tell us what you mean by best. Garrett was $3,500 for the G35 1050 with a speed sensor. They're not cheap. So Ken, you're thinking the durability on the more expensive turbos is there's something to be said there? Sir Camelot, can you ask your contacts when it is necessary for high pressure versus high volume oil pump and educate us? It's not necessary on a Junkyard LS. Neither one of them is. Pendant. I thought that explained the poll question pretty well. Richard, I'm trying to install mild cam on my LS6 liter. Is 590 lift mild? Or do you recommend another setup for the 5 liter? The lift has nothing to do with how mild the cam is. You need to tell us the duration number, and the duration at 50 number is going to be the important one. Do ball bearing turbos really spool faster? I'd like to see a definitive test, a structured definitive test. Building my first 5.3 and going to turbo it. What ring gap? 6.5 thousandths per inch of bore. Should I go to forged pistons? You don't need to. 600 or 700 horsepower. I would just use stock ones. Um, 6.8. Tell us what you're trying to do with your motor, and then we can steer you in the right direction for a cam. Isn't boost pressure irrelevant to turbo size at the same pressure level? What is the pressure level, and how is that different than the boost pressure? I don't know how those two things differ in your statement. My 90 VNT LeBaron made 175 horsepower and 225 foot-pounds at the wheels. So you guys obviously had turned that up. If it was making 15 pounds and you were at the boost cutout limit. You know those times when you have no idea what you're doing, but you do it anyway. Yeah, Turbo Sensor, you're learning, and you're learning by experience, which is the best way to do it. What turbo for a 2010 F-150 5.4, more torque? What kind of power do you want? Probably going to be a GT45 for that. Can't stop thinking diesel, but the same power, less EGT. Do you have any videos on Gen 2 LT1s? Yes, there's a couple of them up there. And in addition to the LT1 stuff, also L99, so the 4.3 liter version of that. We ran the Lingenfelter box ram thing and airflow heads up a cam, I think, on an LT1. The question says bigger and better. I think that should be 1,000 horsepower precision versus 700 horsepower. I already did that. I did the 276 millimeters because the precision that they sent me was supposed to be a 76, 75. And then we had the 76 millimeter CX Racing one. And the difference was, I don't know, 500 horsepower, maxed out. But that really wasn't the question, though. Yeah, Todd, let us know what's going on, man. Scott, I know I understand what you're saying, that you're thinking that if you have 2.5 to 1 back pressure versus boost pressure, then if you lower the back pressure, then you can add power is what you're thinking. But what if you have a situation where that's not happening? What if you have 1 to 1? What if you have 1.5 to 1 or 2 to 1, which is still a good amount? Because for any kind of street turbo, you're not going to have 1 to 1. I've not seen that, and if you do, it's not gonna spool very well. The Johnson short travel lifters are really good. Everybody that I've talked to that's used them has said nothing but good things about them. But I still don't know if they've changed the flow orifice size in the lifter. I can't imagine that would be your low oil issue. I want to put a better turbo on my 17 Malibu LTZ. Is that a Ecotech motor? The oil feed fitting on turbo for an LS series engine. The engine doesn't make any difference. The turbo is what you need to be concerned with. And whether there's a small restrictor hole on there or the right size hole is going to be a function of the turbo. What horsepower did Civic have roughly when it ran at Bonneville to get into the 200 mile an hour club? It doesn't really need very much to go 200. When it went 227, it was probably near 500 at the tire, probably. But we didn't get to run it as fast as it would go at that power level because the half shaft popped out. Oh, modified computer. Okay. Mike, I need to. When I come down to West Tech, I need to get that bell housing back. I need to get it back to West Tech. Big Blocker LS, what is your favorite? Yes. Six eight. I think somebody recommended the one that I would recommend too. I would put a Truck Norris cam in it, or Chopacabra if you want to go with Texas Speed. Anything small like that. Scott, I would agree with that. A good compressor wheel design does more for spooling than ball bearings. I think I would agree with that. I've run turbos. We did a lot of testing. I mentioned before on the B series, the B16 that we had in the Del Sol, and we ran an AR test where we ran a 48, a 6.3, and an 8.2, and then we wanted to step up in turbo size. We went to a TO4 or something. Compressor, and but it still had a T3 hot side on it, and that turbo was terrible. It didn't spool up, and it really didn't make any better power than the little T3s that we had. So it was awful. Looking for a cam and turbo suggestion for a 6-liter board to 6.2 with an LS3 heads. Looking for 800 to 1,000 horsepower. What I would recommend is you not do that. You shouldn't have bored it to a 6.2. You don't need to do that. In fact, you certainly shouldn't do that because now the walls are thin. Unless you've sleeved the block, you should just leave it at a 6-liter, and you could still run those LS3 heads. And 1,000 horsepower is really easy with any kind of camshaft in a 6-liter, and then a S480 turbo or something. Pablo, when you're in your 20s, how did you ration up building a race motor? I don't understand. BTR 5.3 max effort cam test. So explain what you mean by that. Spell that out for me. Java, I don't think the 986 or 987 are springs that I would put on an LS application. I don't think either one of them are enough spring. Richard, anyone recommend someone to make a bell housing adapter? GM style. What's SAE number 2? What is that? Yeah, TurboCentra Burns is right. If he's talking about flushing the lines out or making sure that they're good, that's always a good idea. We see that happen a lot when guys blow their motors up and then they don't flush their oil coolers, and they just get a whole bunch of material back in the motor. It's not good. Mike has the top end together. Way to go, Mike. That's what we'd like to hear. Richard, any plans on a Big Bang L83? We are going to turbo one. We would struggle to get enough fuel to an L83 probably to do a Big Bang on one. SAE2 is a large truck. I don't even know what SAE2 is. I don't recognize that number. So now that we're down at the bottom, right? We're down at the bottom. We can go to live chat. Polls at 51% saying yes. So it's switched now. That's good. BTR has a 5.3 stock block max effort package. So is it a camshaft that fits stock piston to valve clearance? I don't know what you mean by stock block max effort, because a camshaft has nothing to do with how much power the block will take. So again, I don't know which one you're talking about. Turbo Sentra, thanks for reminding me. I need to flush my oil cooler and lines for the turbo. You do. And the other thing that Turbo Sentra that you might want to look at, I don't know if this happened, but the other thing that guys do is when they blow stuff up, particularly when they damage turbos, they don't clean the intercooler out. The intercooler has all sorts of bits in there, wheel bits and stuff. I haven't touched my engine or the Fox in 3 weeks. Yeah, it's tough with the weather. Java, are you the one that asked about the springs? I thought that this was an LS we were talking about. For a small block Chevy, that would be different. I still don't think that I would run those springs. I think that they're too light. Didn't I look up the 986 and 987s? I think they're only 130 pounds or something. Solid roller lifters, classic cams, valve related components. 986 and 987. 132 pounds at 1,750 for the 986 and 121 at 1,800. But the 987 spring actually has more rate. So it's 343 open at 120, so at 600 lift. You can do what you want. I would put more spring in it. This turbo size generally matched to displacement, like a 6.8 liter V10 would be the same as a 6.8 liter V8. No, it's matched to your desired power output. Speaking of Bonneville, we're going to Speed Week, our version of it here in Australia from the 18th to the 26th. If you're running something, good luck, man. Some of the Ford V10s use SAE number 2 and SAE number 3 bolt patterns. Doesn't a Ford V10 just use a modular Ford bolt pattern? SAEs are diesel industrial bell housings. Okay, I'm not hip on the diesel lingo. Can you clean out an intercooler well enough after turbos let go? Sometimes I don't think you can. That's the nice thing about using $100 or $200 intercooler is that you just get another one. $396 big block or an LS3 for a 69 Camaro. I think that it'd be a lot easier to make the power out of an LS3 than it would be out of a 396, and probably less money. Because if you just put a cam in an LS3, it will be 550 or 560. And doing that out of a 396 is going to take a pretty fair bit of stuff. Tack, if we do a 6.8 liter V10, it probably will be a 3 valve. Yeah, same thing on transmission, torque converter lines and coolers. We made sure we did that on the Ben was really good about that when we did the trans on the truck. BTR 5.3 stock block max effort turbo cams 230 something, 250 something. This is BTR's 5.3 max effort hydraulic roller turbo cam. I'm actually not at all interested in running that camshaft because you don't need a camshaft that big to make 1,500 or 2,000 horsepower with a 5.3. You just got to turn the boost up. You think hot taking an engine is worth the cost? It is on some of them, and we normally do that before the machining process if you're going to do machining on it. A lot of people came and went. Even the industrial V10 has a modular pattern. I thought it did. I thought that was going to make it easy for us to bolt a V10 onto the dyno. Casey Max has a new video out. VS Racing was his old turbos, and he's testing his new comp turbos. Huge difference in power. Cool. I had to drain 7 quarts of oil out of the intercooler. Yeah, and then hose out the metal particles. That's the problem, especially if you get oil in there, which they almost always have some residue in there at least. And then that just helps the really tiny metal particles from the blown up impeller or whatever. It makes all that stuff stick in there. So you can't just wash it out a lot of times with water and an air nozzle. Sometimes it's really more trouble than it's worth. Oh, Scott, so you're going to do a diesel run? That'll be cool. Next year. I told you about my idea, 417 LS CNC head, Crowley's crank, yada, yada, yada. Now I lost you again. Okay. Wanting to do twin VS Racing 7875 billet turbos, wanting 1,000 wheel on the gate at 14 pounds. You had a funny look. Well, you wouldn't pick two 7875s to do 1,000 horsepower, even at the tire. That's almost twice that. So are you only going to run it there, or are you going to run it much higher than that? Because if you're not going to run it much higher than that, I would recommend smaller turbos. Because twin 7875s are not going to spool very well, even on a 6-liter. Twin 73, 75s may support how much horsepower on pump? The pump gas thing is I don't know how much power it will support on pump gas because I don't know what you can make on pump gas. The turbos are probably, I don't know, what are they going to be? 73, 69, so I don't know, 850 horsepower turbos or something, depending on which ones they are. So you could support a lot of power, way more than you're ever going to be possible to make with 93 octane. Are those 20s? No, they're 10s. I keep them clean. Is there an LS version of a big block? The closest thing you have is the new 8.1. It has LS-ish heads on it. A GT25. I mean, a real Garrett one might get there, but you should pick a bigger turbo. Running my feed and drain lines for my turbo, and several people told me to drill the block. Some guys like to do that. I don't usually do that. Usually I put them in the pan. Fossil fuel. So the V10 will be you and your son's first turbo build. That'd be great, man. That's a cool thing to do with your son. How do you feel about? I'm sure it's supposed to be copper gaskets or spray paint Permatex copper spray. I've used the copper coat on head gaskets before. Usually we put it on ones that are in not good shape need I call it a head gasket rebuild, and so we spray it on there and put it on. I don't put them on. I didn't put it on any of the Big Bang motors. We just put the gaskets on, but we had freshly machine surfaces for all that stuff. So if you want future growth, Michael, are you the guy that was talking about the twin S475s? If you are, and you're going to go up, then you size the turbos for wherever you think you're going to go to. Just that they're not going to be as responsive as smaller turbos that would be better off at making 1,000 at the tire. My son and I finished the 5.3 with a Summit Stage 2 cam, made 385 rear wheel horsepower. Nice. Maxed out the injectors. Did it have stock injectors in it? Snow barrel. Is the 460? What year is the 460? And is it all stock and stuff? And are you going to run the LQ4 with a run it EFI or run it carbureted? And will the 460 be carbureted? So there's a lot of questions there. The bigger motor is going to be torqueier, like at 2,000 RPM or even 3,000 RPM. So it should be better there. But the LQ4 will make more power probably than the 460 unless you've done some stuff to it. Ford 6.8 V10 guaranteed to lose a water pump at 70,000 miles. Richard, would you revisit the Ford blower but on a cam 6-liter? No. I think Tom has I think he has one of the Ford GT500 blowers. This is a 2.3 liter, but I think he has one of those GT500 blowers on a 6-liter, and I think that it has a sloppy stage 2 cam in it. Richard, how well does a big block fit in a 79 Malibu wagon? It fits perfect, just like every car. Dave, stock injectors. Yeah, stock like 5.3 truck injectors are not very big unless they're alternative fuel ones, or maybe I'm thinking that L33 or the LC9, that those injectors probably are bigger than the LM7 injectors are. What's the best carb for a 5.3 LS twin turbo blow through? We use the 850 that Kevin at CSU sells for all the stuff because we have one at West Tech and it works good. Are ceramic impellers worth it? I think that was more of a gee whiz thing. We had not ceramic, but there was plastic or something, some kind of impeller on maybe on the RB motor that I have. I can't remember if it was on the Neo motor or on the other one. But they would come apart at high speeds though. What size turbos for a twin setup for a 350 for 600 horsepower? You want to do twins? Twins for 600 horsepower could be pretty small. You could go get, well, you can't find them anymore. I was gonna say you could go get 2 of those little T3s from the turbo T-Birds and stuff, and those would do it. But 2 little T3s would do it. Are 210 injectors too big for 1,000 wheel horsepower twin? No, not an 85. You're gonna need quite a bit. You're gonna need at least 1500s anyway. A set of 210s that will work. It's better that you're running 85 on it, but ones that idle are not going to be cheap. Richard, have you ever had a cam company make a grind to your specs? Yeah, I've requested cams of specific lift and duration and LSA numbers and stuff, and they've made cams that I've wanted particularly. I don't even remember looking at the engine bay of a Malibu wagon, quite honestly. But I mean, that motor or that car would have come with a small block, right? I was going to pull it and drop it in the S107 versus the BBS since I've never been able to hook with it. On a 540 blueprint, could it spin a T6 102? Yeah, pretty easily. I mean, we ran twin S475s on it, so, and it has no trouble doing that because it made lots of NA power. And the single turbo that I haven't run a big single turbo on anything other than that 88 millimeter that we did long ago. I think that's probably the biggest one that we've actually run. I have a big one from Byron. I need to see what size it is, but like I don't have any pro mod turbos or anything. But if it will do twin 2 S475s that are good for near 1,000 horsepower each, there's no reason it won't spin a single. And so you would just pick pick the single for the power level that you want. Avery, GT3076s would be a good choice. Those will make a lot more than that, but they should do pretty well at the 600 horsepower level. So I've noticed lots of guys just use stock manifolds for a turbo application. Stock exhaust manifolds, that what you're talking about? Is there just not any benefit from better headers, for example, in an NA application? So is your question whether headers make power NA or whether they make power with the turbo? I didn't get a custom cam ground for me because I thought that there was some magic thing going on. It's something that I wanted to try, and it was for a very particular application. This was for a boat with wet exhaust, And so I wanted to do some things because I'd run a number of cams already on the big block combination, thinking about with this wet exhaust in mind. And then and also looking at the power curve, I wanted to do particular things to the power curves. And because I had lots of other data points from other camshafts, I'm like, well, here's what I think I should do. And then I called Billy and said, look, here's what I want to do. He goes, oh yeah, that should work. So because if Billy tells me it's going to work, if he would have told me that's a really bad idea, then I wouldn't have done it. But he said, no, that's probably going to do what you want. And so we'll just make that, and it all worked out. Our 50 millimeter blow off valve and wastegate properly sized for a GT45 aiming at 600 horsepower. Yes, that should be enough. The blow off valve size is not the thing, but the thing that's more of a concern is the wastegate. I'm thinking of two GT35s for my J-Swap NSX. Or one's single Big Warner 369. How much power are you trying to make? Two GT3582s are that's like 1,000 horsepower with the turbos, or more maybe on an NSX. Alex, the thing that you need to do externally would be headers and a tune. All those are pretty easy without other upgrades. Camshaft and springs would go a long way. I'm just here to help up the numbers. Thought you cared, man. It's not nice. Like I said, it won't hook, but it makes a nice burnout truck. That sounds like a perfect truck. You need 124 millimeter turbo for the 540. That's a lot. Would a 7675 precision on a rod and piston 351 be fine for? Well, 800 to 1,000 wheel horsepower is a big split. So a 7675 precision like the one that I had would certainly do 1,000 wheel horsepower, because we made 1,200 or 1,250 or something with it at the flywheel. So it should certainly do 1,000 wheel horsepower. I'm just here to help make up the numbers. I thought that was my job. Stock manifolds are strong, structurally sound compared to a lot of headers, especially cheap headers. And also, again, the question isn't, are headers better than stock exhaust manifolds? They are. They will make more power. But at what point will they make more power? And at what cost? They cost more. They're harder to fit. You could just turn the boost up. Can you still make 1,000 horsepower with the stock exhaust manifolds with your 1,000 horsepower turbo? Yeah. So again, we got to ask the right question. Any chance of Uncle Richie LS Fest? I would just like to be able to go to LS Fest. What's your cam preference for a twin turbo 5.3 setup? Again, the cam that I would pick for the combination has nothing to do with it being turbocharged, because we know every cam is a turbo cam. But what you have to ask yourself are all the other questions that you want the camshaft to do. What are the other things? Do I want it to idle nice? Do I want it to have chop? Do I want to use a stock converter? What kind of RPM range do I want to run? What kind of power do I want to run? Do I care about fuel mileage? All that stuff. And then you pick a cam that does that, and then you just add the boost to it. And it doesn't matter whether it's a single turbo or a twin turbo. They will do the same thing. Twin GT35s or twin GT45s for a 900 horsepower LQ4. I think twin GT35s if I'm doing that on the street. Ring gap, yes. Always yes. What turbo would you recommend for a 2.5 liter Ranger? Has a cam ported head with like 350 to 400. A single 3076 probably would be good. And you still have access to your plugs. Although I have to tell you, I'm very impressed, and I got to hand it to them. The guys from Holly, the headers that they made, and I need to get a set. In fact, I've got to write something down here. I need to get a set. The headers that they made that look like all of the rest of the headers that are out there, but theirs have spark plug access, and they've been made so that they don't burn plug wires. So obviously they've been listening to people that have been complaining about that for years. Total timing on the 6-liter LQ4 NA all stock. When we run them on the engine dyno, the way that we run them at 29 degrees. Can you talk about converters? Not right now because we're at the end of the thing, but you do need one. And it's having the right converter is very, very important. So we're going to close out our poll. 55% saying yes. Bigger, better turbos are bigger and better. John, you got a 65 Buick Special with a 310 Wildcat V8. Never thought about boosting, but does anyone have a recommendation on PSI I could safely run before we can get? What kind of fuel are you running on it, and how sensitive to detonation is it, and all that? Because I don't know anything about that exact motor that you have in that car. What compression is it? What's the cam like in it? Is it sensitive to detonation now? Nathan, we run 29 degrees of timing on the motors that we run on the engine dyno with 91 octane. We don't have 93. But I'll tell you that most of the cars that go on the chassis dyno don't get away with that much timing. I think a Wildcat's an awesome motor. Six and a half, not 60,000s or 75,000s, 6,500s. So that the 6 and the 7 both need to move over 1 decimal point. But 6,500s per inch of bore on a Hemi running boost, yes. Why don't you have access to 93 octane? Because all of our pump gas is 91 octane here in California. We also have E85, which I run all the time in boosted stuff. But his question was about 93, and we don't run 93. We run 91 because that's what all the premium is. Do you like a Buick nailhead for performance? I've never tested a nailhead. I like them just because it's an old motor, and that's kind of cool. But that if I was building a performance motor, a Buick nailhead would not be my go-to engine. There you go. There's 6,500s. I do have a slant 6. Fairway LS single turbo size recommendation for 1,300 to 1,500. What's 1,500 horsepower going to be, like a single 96 or something? So I thought I saw like a GT55 was kind of in that range. My wastegate will be off the 90 that feeds a turbo like this. So Jim, you cut out the valve shrouds. You should get Sean Hyland's book. Because I think he shows you, it might show you in there what to do and what not to do. So supercars there have to use 91, yeah, or 85. Nathan, we normally pull 4 degrees away for each 100 horsepower. A boosted slant 6. I will run a turbo on it probably. Michael, just whatever a stock plug is in that, just go 1 or 2 ranges colder than that. The owner of Ignite Ethanol claims E85 will be gone in 3 years. I better get all my boosted stuff done, right? You're shooting for 1,800 horsepower on a 6-liter with upgraded rods and pistons. If you're trying to make 1,800 horsepower, you need to upgrade the block too. And you're going to have to probably hip the heads and do all that stuff. You're up in a range where it's, I mean, you can make the horsepower. I just don't know how long it will last with that stuff. But those two S475s will easily do 1,800. Nathan just pulled the current file. They're running 22 degrees total NA and 18 degrees with nitrous. 22 NA seems low. Yeah, I think that's low. I mean, 22 maybe at the torque peak. Jim, happy to help, man. How about blow through turbo with small injectors for cylinder correction, big boost? Yeah, that's possible. The correction, though, is really going to come from the manifold design and not so much the fact that it has a carburetor. A Hemi Slant 6. Those are the Australian ones, right? What is the horsepower limit for a Gen 3 LS stock block with forged internals? I don't know. We know that the stock stuff will go to 1,500. And the Gen 3 stuff didn't quite get to 1,500 before something broke. And I'm not confident that I'd like to revisit that and see what's happening even on the Gen 3 stuff. But we made lots and lots of runs at 1,000 horsepower, so it's safe there. And if you have forged internals, you're not going to break something there. I just don't know where the block problem is. You want the wastegate in the direction of the exhaust flow. So if this is your exhaust manifold and it's flowing this way, and you have a tube coming off your exhaust manifolds, then you want the wastegate like right here, and then you want the turn to go up, and then you want the turbo up here. Richard, do you think there's any benefit to a twin scroll turbo just by dumping the exhaust into both inlets? I don't think. I haven't tested a twin scroll with a divided exhaust, with each one going into its dedicated side on a twin scroll. I think that there is something to be had there. I just don't know what it is. In my opinion, running like what we normally run, because I don't care how the exhaust housing is on these turbos. Sometimes I have divided ones, and sometimes I have undivided ones. But the thing that I'm bolting them onto is all undivided. So the divider basically is just kind of a restriction. What's the best junkyard budget NA setup? Probably something with nitrous. Eight hundred horsepower with twin turbos, 6-liter, two 3076s or two 3582s. We can talk about all that stuff on the 24-hour one on the marathon, because we're going to be talking about Bigfoot stuff, big feet. Thank you guys all for showing up. I'm out.